Welcome back to State of Texas In Depth. This morning we're talking schools and campaigns. Our roundtable today brings Morgan Smith from the Texas Tribune and Ben Philpott from KUT. Thanks for being with us, guys.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
So this week we had the big HB 5 topic come up in the Senate Education Committee, the interim committee over at the Capitol. Dan Patrick leading that one, of course. HB 5, still a talker after the legislative session. I guess the STAR exam is kind of the big thing right now, right?
That's right. Well, we are starting to see the results come in from the state standardized tests and looking at whether or not students are on track to graduate because they have to pass 5 of those state standardized exams in order to do so. So we've had a couple of legislative hearings now where senators have talked to Texas Education Agency officials and asked them how students are doing, and despite a lowered transitional standard to pass these exams, we still have 24% of Texas students who are not on course to graduate.
Big controversy right now because a lot of parents are wanting to be able to opt their children out of these exams.
Well, some parents are, yes. You know, and it's just not legal to do that. You know, state law says it's not about just parental choice. For that, it's you know, you do have to take the tests. The tests have to be administered by the state, and you know, it's a little bit of a side issue, I think. I mean, I think the real interesting thing is like Morgan was saying, the rollout. You only had to have a 37 on some of the tests to be considered passing. 24% aren't ready, which they did, though, make a point that was better than the tax test, where 28% weren't on track to graduate after the first time they took the round of tests. So, but it's going to continue. I mean, we've reduced from 15 to 5, and whether or not they change that will be a big topic in the next session.
So, obviously, this has been a controversial committee idea, and Dan Patrick, as we said, was, you know, heading this committee, and he is in the runoff for lieutenant governor against Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst. Is that some political maneuvering there? Because Dewhurst put him in this role.
That's right. I mean, that was kind of from the start the idea. There was this speculation that Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst made Senator Dan Patrick the chairman of the Education Committee, in kind of a behind-the-scenes agreement that Dan Patrick wasn't going to run for lieutenant governor, or that Dan Patrick would endorse him in the runoff or in his race for U.S. Senate against Ted Cruz. None of that is ever really confirmed, but that was the speculation. And now you had during the legislative session, Dan Patrick played a very prominent role in talking about important issues that a lot of Texans are paying attention to, like testing, and then some issues that conservative voters care about in particular, like school choice. So he definitely had a platform that he wouldn't have had if he was not Senate Education Chairman.
It was interesting that at that hearing this week, though, that you had Dan Patrick, of course, as the chair, but then Leticia Van de Putte, who, if Patrick wins the runoff, would be his challenger in lieutenant governor race on the Democratic side, and State Senator Wendy Davis were at the panel as well. I thought it was very interesting just listening to how polite all 3 of them were to each other during the entire hearing.
If Greg Abbott would have been there.
That's right.
Yeah.
It would have been
we also had Ken Paxton, who's running for attorney. Yeah, I think I counted 4 current candidates for statewide office sitting in on that hearing. It was an interesting one.
So, statewide office. Let's come back to Dan Patrick, though. You know, we've also seen him not only in the Education Committee this week, but going up on an immigration debate against someone who's not even running against him. We've got the San Antonio Mayor, Julian Castro. Immigration has been a big topic they've sparred, and finally they sat down this week. What happened?
There was a lot of yelling. I actually thought Evan Smith, who moderated the event, really kind of summed up what we were about to hear for the entire hour in his opening remarks. That Dan Patrick was there to present a more moderate tone and to do outreach to Hispanics, and that Mayor Julian Castro was there to make Dan Patrick look like an extremist. And that's essentially what we got for an entire hour. Talk of Dan Patrick pushing away moderate Republicans, pushing away Hispanics that the Republicans are trying to get to vote for them, and Patrick, you know, making many attempts to talk about abortion or education or things that had nothing to do with this debate on immigration as an effort to make connections with Hispanic voters.
Is that how you saw it as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely saw an emphasis from Patrick on the compassion he felt for people who are crossing the border illegally, the fact that he is very concerned about the exploitation of people who are trying to come to the United States. But you'd also, he continued to mention some of his more controversial points about the crime that are committed by illegal immigrants in Texas, the supposed diseases that he says are being brought over.
He mentioned anchor babies again.
Yes, he mentioned anchor babies. So you did, and that was in part to some needling from Castro and some questioning from Evan Smith, but you did see more of a focus on Patrick's part on kind of the compassion and an attempt to really say that, hey, I think these people are humans. I care about them. These are my policy positions, but I recognize, where they're coming from.
So even though his runoff opponent, David Dewhurst, wasn't there, it probably really helped Patrick in that race.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not really sure at all. I think that because he didn't mention Dewhurst at all throughout the night. He did make one fleeting reference to getting 41% in the primary election that then sent him to the runoff. But Dewhurst immediately came out afterwards trying to actually jump on the Castro bandwagon. Look here, this is someone who is too extreme for the state of Texas. I talked to a political scientist this week who said that Dewhurst now has that really interesting role of at the same time saying that Patrick is too extreme and reaching out for moderates, but then also saying, oh, but of course I am also extremely conservative, and therefore you should vote for me. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't know that it had. I think that maybe this one had more to do with issues we might see in the general election than in the runoff in May.
But you did see Dewhurst this week come out for the first get up on air with a negative television ad about Dan Patrick for the first time since the primary results came in, and I think you have seen a more aggressive tone from his campaign that suggests that they're going to go on the offensive now and really go after Dan Patrick for some of the issues that I think Dewhurst had kind of let the other two candidates in the primary attack Patrick on. So it'll be interesting to see how much traction that has, or if it's just simply too late in the game for it to make any kind of impact.
We have just about 45 seconds left, and I just want to get your real quick opinion on Julian Castro. People talk about him as maybe a Democratic candidate for president. So now we've also got Ted Cruz being brought up this week because of the public policy poll saying that he has a 47% approval rating among Republicans in Texas. That's more than anyone else that we've really been talking about recently, and he's at the lead of the pack for presidential possibilities as well. What does that say for Ted Cruz?
I mean, I think that puts him in a good position, and I think the other kind of piece of that is that we also have our Governor Rick Perry, who I think is probably eyeing another presidential run. So there are going to be a lot of potential candidates coming out of Texas.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys being with us. And coming up on State of Texas In Depth. As lawmakers look for ways to prevent tragedies like the West explosion, we take you to that small town 1 year later when State of Texas In Depth returns.